Welcome to the Mountain Dude Podcast, brought to you by Initial Ascent, where we share stories of grit, determination, and the relentless pursuit of growth. This is a space where backcountry hunting meets the deeper lessons of life. Success born from struggle and the art of carrying heavy loads more comfortably, both physically and metaphorically, through faith and perseverance. Join us as we explore the paths that shape us, celebrate victories big and small, and fuel our journey with hope and tenacity. This is the Mountain Dude Podcast, where we climb higher together. That's good. Yeah. But we're good to go? Yeah. Okay. Well, welcome to the Mountain Dude Podcast. Kyle Kamp.
Here we are.
I
would say it's good to see you, but it's always good to see you.
Yeah. Kyle Kamp from Valley to Peak Nutrition. The way we start every Mountain Dude podcast is we start it with prayer. So I'll lead that. Father, thank you for this day, and thank you for Kyle. Thank you for our friendship, and we just thank you for this platform to be able to come bring guests and just talk about business. We talk about personal stuff. We talk about hunting. We just thank you for everything you've provided. We ask that you bless our podcast, bless our conversation, bless our families, and we know that there's somebody out there that needs to hear what we have to say. We ask this in your name. We love you. Amen.
Amen.
Okay. So, Kyle, where do we start? Man, we're both hunters. That's a key thing that's probably kind of brought us together. Passionate about backcountry hunting specifically, and passionate about another thing that I am very passionate about, but I have to say that I'm on the other side of the mammalian.
I'm not even sure where you're going with this, so I'm excited to hear it.
Yeah, so I feed cows for a living. I've had for 25 years. I have had a practice as a nutritionist in the dairy industry. And so I consult with dairy clients that most of them own very large dairies. And so I get to deal in that world. I get to deal with ruminant animals. Now, you are a human nutritionist.
That's right. You might have it better in getting to deal with cows rather than people.
Cows don't talk back.
That's true.
That. But we've got to make it pretty simple for the cows as well. Take me back. I'm so passionate about nutrition, but here's the thing. I know that we're both mammals. I feed mammals. You feed mammals. But I just completely get discombobulated when I go to do my own nutrition. And that's one reason I've hired you as a consultant. So, all successful people surround themselves with more successful people.
That's good advice.
And so that's what I've done. But take me back a little bit. Tell me how you started. What got you into nutrition?
Wow, that's a really good question. I am, and this is a very broad statement that's not true across the board, but it is what you typically find. I'm a dietitian by profession. I'm an atypical dietitian in that I didn't, grow up knowing anything about nutrition at all. Grew up single mom. My dad was still very involved, but she had custody of me and she worked full time. And so we ate, really whatever she could put on the table, which was eating out a lot. And my dad fed me too. I mean, he was still a great dad, so I don't want to portray him that he wasn't. To the point though of where I just developed, I developed really poor habits over time. But as I grew into being, a young man, 18, 19, 20 years old, I weighed 270 pounds. And so that's, about 140, 130 more pounds than I am now. Mm-hmm. And so there was this, this cue or this catalyst or whatever, phrasing that you want to put to it whenever I was about 17 or 18 years old, where I just thought I didn't know anything about health at the time, but I knew, that whatever path I was on was not going to work, wasn't going to fix it. And so I started making just really small changes in my habits that seemed just like common sense. I mean, things like, rather than eating a cheeseburger as a snack, I'm going to get an apple. Or I remember, going to fast food restaurant. One that stands out is like I'd go to Wendy's, get a grilled chicken. I'd take one part of the bun off. I'd get chili instead of fries. I'd get water instead of a soda, and I'd skip the Frosty. Just like things that seem intelligent moves to make.
Yeah.
And slowly started to lose weight. And, like one thing that we'll say a lot to people is you're going to have, in the beginning, it's going to be a lot of intentional choice. And that intentional choice will eventually move to subconscious decisions that you're just making, right? But there's always going to be something in the beginning when you start to see progress that's going to beget more progress because it's going to motivate you, right? And it did. And so I just kept making these small changes. And for the first time ever in my life, because I'd had multiple runs at trying to lose weight before, I really started to build some momentum. And the way that my brain is wired, and this answers the heart of your question, is, I want to know, why? Why does getting what I got at Wendy's, that order change? What happens inside of me that means I lose weight? Mm-hmm. And so I just kept wanting to learn more. And naturally, as I learned more, I started to change more things and started to implement exercise, which eventually led me back to school and now the career path that I'm on. But yeah, I think the initial thing was realizing I had to change something for my life, literally meant my life. And then trying to implement it after so many failed attempts. And I honestly, I don't know if I could do what I do now if I, and I don't mean this is going to sound arrogant. I don't mean for it to. I don't know that I could do what I do now as good as I do it now if I hadn't had experienced that, because I had to make it make sense to myself. And that is because I'm not a bookworm. I had to figure out, what does this mean? What does this mean practically for me? How do I go and implement this? And so, yeah, a really long, hard journey, but really grateful for it now, for sure.
Where'd you go to school?
I did undergrad in Indiana, which is where I grew up, University of Southern Indiana. And in fact, the year before I enrolled, they had just started this program called dietetics. They had a general nutrition, health and fitness degree, but not dietetics. So I met with a guidance counselor. I was not a strong student. A lot of my life mirrored my dietary habits as a young man. And she heavily discouraged me from doing it because I had no science, no math background. And I just told her, I made her a deal. I said, I'll go. If I fail any classes, I'll change my major. And dude, for the next years until post-grad, until I got moved out here for my residency internship program, I was all in, just trying to learn and get what I needed to get through school. And that meant a lot of remedial classes before I ever got some that counted, especially in math. Right. But slowly and surely, yeah, I ended up going to undergrad out there. And then the way that program works is they match you, and you have to do several hundred hours of supervised practice. And so there's a computer system that says, hey, you look like you might be a good fit here. They think that they'd like to have you there. Here's where you're going. It's this big day.
Oh, wow.
Right. It's like one day everyone gets told across the nation who's in this program, here's where your internship's going to be. And so it said, you're going to Idaho, and Meridian, Idaho. I was like, oh my God, that sounds awful.
Okay. Did you know where Idaho was?
I did. I did. Here's what I knew. Because my mom, moved out here, gosh, it's probably been 30 years ago. And she lived in Hagerman. And so I spent summers in Hagerman with her. But that was it. That was all I knew. I mean, I went to Hagerman and then to the Boise airport. So my view of Idaho was that stretch between, and you'll appreciate this because that's Dairyland, right? Between Hagerman and Boise, which is like Glenn's Ferry. It's like the gnarliest, most desert country on the face of the planet. So I thought, I'm just going to go out here. I'm going to get this over with, and then I'm going to move back home. And then I saw what you know of Idaho. And I was like, oh, that's it. I'm staying here. So I've been here for almost just under 15 years.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that region of Idaho that you're talking about. So when I first came out here in 2000, so my wife and I got married on a Saturday, and we packed everything we owned on Monday and moved to Idaho in separate vehicles. That was the honeymoon.
And where were you guys living?
From Alabama.
What a drive.
Yeah, we were in Auburn, Alabama at the time, and I was taking a job with a company out here to be a nutritionist, and they were telling me that they were gonna base me in Twin Falls, but we had to go through. We were going to go to Nampa and stay for a little while we learned, while I learned some stuff and just kind of got oriented, and then I would be based out of Twin Falls, and so we're driving Twin Falls, and we have these walkie-talkies because back then we didn't have cell phones.
Yeah, no cell phones.
And so we had these walkie-talkies, and I'm all excited because I'm jacked that I'm moving out west. My wife, not so much. And we're going through Twin Falls or, past Twin Falls there. And I'm like, honey, we're here. And little did I know she was bawling on the other end because she's looking at nothing that looks like Alabama.
Yeah.
And was not happy.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was, so that desolate country out there. Yeah. I was all excited about it because it was so different than what I was used to. And she was not. So
yeah. She like it now?
She loves it now. Yeah. Yeah. We're in the city of trees, right?
That's right. Yeah.
So anyway, okay. So you went into that program, got your certification or whatever. And then, from there, did you start your business then, or did you work somewhere?
Yeah. So I came out here, did all my undergrad in the hospital did all my postgrad stuff. The hospital that I internship at had a position open when I finished. Okay. And, it was easily hands down my favorite rotation. So it was a no-brainer for me. And, I got along really well with them. So it was essentially, just here's your floors. Are you ready? Yeah, I'm ready. So okay. I started working there, and I worked at the hospital for years, between inpatient unit and then an outpatient clinic too. And so inpatient responsibilities were predominantly around, mine were between CV, ICU, cardiovascular type of stuff to gut and GI type of stuff. And then outpatient, you were consulting with different patients that either newly diagnosed or they wanted to lose weight or whatever. But meantime, and I've kind of shared this with you before, Valley to Peak was never, I never started it to do what it is. It just kind of happened. And I initially was on a podcast, and when I was on this podcast, I wanted a place for people to be able to reach out and have questions after they listened to it, other than just a Gmail account. Not that I cared about people reaching out to my personal account. It just looked so man in his basement to me, right?
Gotcha.
So I knew nothing about anything, like how to get this going. But I was back home on Christmas trying to think of a name to buy a domain to get this email. And I was like, well, this Valley to Peak thing like kind of makes sense both from a mountain focused business and the journey. Like a lot of people feel like they start in the valley and hopefully work themselves up to a peak. So I was like, oh, this is great. And domain name was open, bought it for $8 and established an email account, info@v2pnutrition.com, still have it, and did this podcast. And when it released, sure enough, emails started coming in. The first year we had 2 clients the whole year. And then it just continued to grow over the years that I had, since we had started it. And when it continued to grow to the point of where I was doing both full time. I was doing Valley to Peak full time. I was doing the hospital full time, and it was hammering me. Like, and we had 1 kid. My wife had just found out that she was pregnant with our 2nd kid. In fact, the day that I submitted my 2-week, I gave my month's notice. We found out the day before that we were pregnant with our 2nd. And I mean, we were like, well, we prayed about this, so God's not shocked. We shouldn't be shocked. I'm still going to resign. And, that was in 2001. And what the catalyst here was, I had just lost my dad unexpectedly in 2000. And it was one of those, like, cliche as it sounds, like, this is it. You get one life. You might as well see if you can do this, because you're probably not going to get another chance to do it. So I did. Left the hospital, and that was going on 5 years ago. I've done this full time. Valley to Peak's first year, though, was in 2017, I think it was. And so, yeah, eventually, left the hospital and been doing this full time ever since.
Wow. That's great, man. And you said something there, about God, and he's got a plan.
Yeah.
And I forget exactly what you said, but it struck me, and it's so true. My wife and I ended up leaving the company that hired me to come out here in 2002. And a couple of months before that, we had found out that we were pregnant with twins. And we just, God's got this. We're going to be fine. Yeah. And boy, what a leap of faith, and at a crucial time.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you and I have talked about, and I think it's very much linear to the growth that you guys have had here. Is, I think sometimes people, think that to begin something like what you've turned this into, or like my experience is, you got to have this mega plan. It's like, I bought a domain, and then I just did the next thing that was in front of me. And then the next thing that was in front of me, I knew nothing about what I was doing. And it's just, I think sometimes God puts those things in front of you, and you just do the next best thing that your hand can do. Yeah. Right. And eventually these things keep getting bigger. The tasks keep getting bigger, and somehow that brings more opportunities too, and I don't think there's any, magic rhythm. I think if I had known what I know now, probably never would have started it, because it was work. It was a lot of work. But he probably knew that too, right? Like, we're not going to let you know quite what's going on here. You'll be happy, but you got some work ahead of you.
Well, one thing Joe and I found out, through this business, and putting our faith in God, that it's all in his timing, is that he's never given us anything that we couldn't take. Yeah. He's never, opened up impossibilities to us. And so, that's one thing that we're extremely thankful for. And we just, if he closes one door, then lots of times he slams it, and he opens up a couple more, that end up being even better. So, I think that's been important for us to realize. And sometimes you got to sit back and you got to remember that, hey, this is not our timing. Yeah. Right. So, All right. Well, I mean, what a cool journey there. And we'll come back to kind of where they can find you and everything in a little bit. But what I want to get into as hunters, I want to get into nutrition. I want to get into just some basics. You know, that's one thing that you have been really good since I've been working with you. And I started working with you because I'm 50 years old. I've done a lot of different types of plans. You know, I was a football player back when I could just throw down just enormous amounts of food, and it was crap, but I was burning it. And, you know, I was just pounding on, you know, the pounds of muscle and everything because I was young and I could do that. Right. And now, I am still in shape. I do like to keep myself in shape, but, I can tell my metabolism's slowing down. And I just decided it was time for a reset. It was time to actually learn the right way. And so that's the reason I called you. And I got to be honest, you know, we're 3-4 weeks in now, and I am digging it. It's awesome. Good. It's awesome. But I want you to take us back to basics. Okay, let's just talk basics and talk about, you know, what we as people, you know, and as hunters, you know, what do we need to worry about? I mean, I've been through the carnivore, I've been through the paleo, the keto thing, you know, trying to stay away from carbs. Carbs are the enemy, you know, but I'm learning something different with you. And I'm feeling different with the program that I've got. It's very well balanced. And so let's talk about it. Let's talk about carbs. Let's talk about fat. Let's talk about protein from a basic standpoint, layman's terms.
All right. We have a podcast, so my brain goes to that. So this might be as much an interview for you as it is me. So I had 2 questions based off of that. When you ask that question, are you talking specifically about needs in the backcountry or just day-to-day common needs as we go about our daily lives and training? And then second, as you said that, what my brain went to is, if I were listening to this, I'd want to know, what do you feel that's different? Because I think that as we describe what the basics are, it's a good sort of thing to keep in the back of someone's mind of, oh, well, that's what he notices by doing those things. Because we'll talk about, like, well, you know, what it is and why it is that, but the podcast host in me can't help but ask.
No, and that's great. Yeah, you guys got to check out. He has got a wonderful podcast that we listen to often. I say we, as in my wife and myself, we listen to it. And it's called the Valley to Peak Nutrition Podcast.
Clever, right?
Yeah, and so you can check that out. I highly suggest, if you want to dig deeper into a lot of the things that we're talking about, and you have questions about nutrition, go on there. It's been around for how long?
Geez, we've been doing it for a few years now, and I mean, there's a lot of guests that we'll interview about certain topics, right? Trying to get to the nitty-gritty stuff. But a lot of it, too, is just questions that people send us. And those questions, what I've found, is in alignment with general questions that the culture wants to know, right? Things that are popular right now, people want clarity on. That's why I love this format so much, is because you can provide a longer explanation. And a lot of social media, they limit you to, you know, a minute or 3 minutes or whatever. And like, the thing that I would venture to guess, and we ought to do this, you ought to go back and do like a counter that says, how many times does he say it depends on this podcast? Because as we start to get into it, that is if you want to vet a person online who's giving nutrition advice, you should count whether or not they say it depends before their answers. If they are not using that phrase, you don't have to ever look us up ever, but in the future, for anybody that you listen to, if they are not using that phrase, you should find somebody else, because it always depends on something. There's 2. So that's what most of the podcast is based off of.
Okay. Now remind me the first question you had.
So 2 questions. The first question is, are we, when we talk about kind of general overview, common nutrition, daily, we're talking about daily. We're not venturing into the backcountry.
Yeah. Let's, so first, because we're going to do a couple of episodes out of this. Okay. The second episode, we're going to really get honed in on backcountry nutrition. We're going to get into that and how to do it and what to pack and different things like that. But let's talk about, we just finished season. Okay. Yeah. But we train as backcountry hunters. We train all the time. Okay. It's a 365 day a year deal. So me every day, what should I be doing? That second question you ask is what am I feeling? Right.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what I'm feeling. And now let's go back just a second, because I've been on the low carb or no carb thing for a long time. And I've really tried to stay away from carbs. I've done the carnivore, keto, all that stuff. And I needed to get back to basics. And so one thing that you did for me was you split up my meals into 4 parts. That has been extremely helpful to me. Not only from an energy standpoint and getting through my day, whether it be my workouts or here at the shop or whatever I'm doing, I think that the main thing that I'm seeing is that I just don't get tired.
Yeah. I'm
not getting tired until I'm supposed to get tired. Yeah. And that's at night, when it's time to go to bed. I'm feeling consistently energized. And so to second that, digestively, it's changed me for the good. I mean, we'll get real detailed here, but people talk about being regular, right? Yeah. And people, and I've got friends that, they do the same thing, same time every day, including, number 2, and it's at 7:02 a.m. every single day.
Yeah.
And I never experienced that ever.
Well, welcome to the land of regularity.
I feel like this is a win. This is a huge win. Yeah. But you ask, how do I feel? That in a nutshell, those 2 things, consistent energy and, I'm regularly doing things like I'm supposed to on a clock.
Yep. So if you go back to the question before I spun that on you, which is, what are the basics? One of the main things for you, like when we sat down, was you were in this rhythm, like a lot of us, where you just didn't eat much. You'd kind of nibble through the day, normally too busy to skip breakfast, and then
intermittent fasting,
and then go home, and people will typically then be so hungry that it's difficult to control their intake. So the distribution, the equal distribution of your fueling, let's call it, through the day was twofold. One, to try to prevent these energy crashes and spikes. But second, to prevent going home and then just being unable to ever get a rein on it at home, because your appetite's going to regulate. For the most part, it's going to regulate on a pretty narrow margin based on your calorie needs, your personal energy needs, right? And it has a very, very good sensor built into it that will tell you whether or not you're close to that margin, because the one thing it wants is to keep you alive. It does not care about your muscle. It does not care what you do for a job. The only thing that it cares about is to keep you alive. And so it's going to take its cues off of what you eat during a day, how often it comes in, what your expenditure is, either intentionally through exercise or unintentionally, let's call it, through work. For example, you and I work in an office. There's guys out right now probably listening to this that are sweating somewhere digging, doing manual labor. The energy expenditure between those two people are quite different. So your appetite's going to fight to regulate that. And if you don't give it something through the day, it's going to be very difficult to shut that off at the end of the day. Because again, all it wants to do is keep you alive. And it doesn't know when it's going to go through another really long period of just these low intake things. And so that was one of our goals in trying to get that distributed for you. Now, you have a couple of different things to look at. We'll frame this through the lens of weight gain and weight loss, not to try to make people skinny, just through the lens of those two things. You can eat anything on the face of the planet and get a calorie from it. Good quality doesn't matter. Bad quality doesn't matter. Whatever definitions you put to those things. That will control what your weight does, be it go up, maintain it, go down. What you choose, though, to make up those calories come from the macronutrients. We have 3 of them: carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. Yep. What I think a lot of people miss, and this is maybe the nugget to take away from this, is that each of those have their own unique role or task in human nutrition. Carbohydrates' predominant role is energy. Protein's predominant role is the repair, growth, recovery of a muscle or really any lean tissue. And then fat is for overall health and transport of hormones. So the game then becomes, if you're wanting to, I hate this word, but we'll use it because I think people are familiar with it. The game then becomes to optimize your nutrition as you're trying to figure out what dosages of those 3 things do I need based on my life. And
I think I said that in our first meeting. That was a big word.
You did, but I was going with it. Yeah. But, you're trying to figure out what are the variables in a person's life to help them get the desired outcome that they need. And that's where those doses come from. So much of the effect that you're feeling is us trying to figure out and get to the bottom of what those doses are. Yeah. All right. And so what you hear, though, is a lot of what you had experienced prior to coming in. This is there's one way. Right, there's one way, and that could be any variety of different things. Things always come full circle. It was keto, and then it was carnivore, and it'll come full circle again, right? That's not the only way. And so if a person is feeling a certain way, following a certain approach, that does not mean that's the only thing that'll work. And it also does not mean that they're just kind of stuck in that. You can always figure out something, but there's work involved. And that's where my hat goes off to you and other people is you're willing to figure it out, right? Because I think you would say that even though you feel better for the 2 main reasons that you pointed out, which a lot of people may say, gosh, that alone would be worth it to me to try. I think even you would say yeah, I have to put more thought to it than I used to. And that, one thing we say all the time is nutrition is a game of concessions. You are always giving something up in exchange for something different. Sometimes that's time in exchange for feeling better. Sometimes that's something you really, really want, like 3 donuts in exchange for not doing 3 donuts, but maybe having 1 and something different, like something with some protein in it. Mm-hmm. Right? But it's always a concession. You're always giving something else up in exchange for something else. And I think that everyone is tasked with that, trying to decide, it is worth me giving up X to get Y, or it's not.
Yeah. And one thing in the backcountry, if we want to jump to that for just a second, I've had guys that they're full blown low carb, and then they go and do a bunch of miles in the backcountry and bonk. And why is that?
Well, I mean,
they run out of fuel.
Yeah. Right. Bingo. Yep. So you have, I don't know if we want to save this for the backcountry portion of this, because this might go down a whole nother hole.
We can go wherever we want to go.
Okay.
That's fine.
So you have reserves, right? You have reserves. But once those reserves are tapped out, your body is going to want to draw off of something. Enter, high fat being a fuel source conversation here. one thing that's contingent and people maybe aren't familiar with is much of that is going to depend on the intensity of what you're doing. Intensity, duration, and length of time. So if you are going, I mean, I hunt a lot. Mm-hmm. I've not really been on many Western hunts that are just like easy. I've never just walked flat ground. Like there's always a degree of intensity that is greater than walking casually, especially if you're talking about something like archery elk, right?
Yep.
And so if you're thinking about duration and intensity and exhausting those reserves, you're going to need to replace those. Fat can be a fuel source, but if the intensity is higher, it's not the right type of fuel source and you will fill a bonk. And so another common misconception is like, oh, well, I'm a X, Y, or Z burner. I'm a fat burner or I'm a carb burner. Your body is always using a continuum of fuels based on that intensity and based on the duration, based on a lot of these things. If you are not supplying the right type of fuel, and if you're not replacing it intermittently throughout the course of the day, you will hit a wall, right? And so, yeah, that becomes a major piece of things as you're trying to ensure that you're getting things in with consistency and you're trying to get in the right types of fuel sources.
And that's why you hear like some of these folks that do the Pacific Coast Trail, and some of those ultra guys, they'll talk about, you know, I'll just stop at the convenience store, you know, on one of my stops, and I will pound, you know, 5 packs of donuts and just do remarkably well.
Yeah.
But it's because of the type of, I mean, they're expending so many calories all at one time. They're using it as fuel.
Yeah.
It's junk food, but it's fuel and it's quick.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, my brain goes a million different directions with this, but it's the intensity too, right? So, you know, for example, you're always using a continuum of fuels, a mixture of fats and carbohydrates. The goal is that you don't want to use protein as fuel. That's right. The goal. If you can stay out of it. Now, there are times in human metabolism where that shift happens, and we, you know, probably get to that at some point. But as your intensity climbs, that pendulum begins to shift more in favor of carbohydrate, to the point of where once you are knocking on the door of, call it 80 to 85% of all you've got in you, right? It's 100% carbohydrate. You need to supply some carbohydrate if you want your muscle to respond in the way that you want it to, which is to not fall short. Mm-hmm. You will not die not having that, but you will not be able to go at the same intensity that you once were, right? And so that's a piece of it. There's undoubtedly going to be someone listening who hears, you know, the junk food thing, and you know, you're talking about, I'm just so apprehensive to go down this hole, but you're talking about inflammatory markers and inflammation because of the quality. Right. And we don't find that when you study it, right? And I know that term is sometimes lost on people. And so I would insert here too, you are the litmus test is what we say. You could have someone who's like probably at this point screaming and punched a hole in their radio or their phone or whatever they're listening on. But if you feel good operating on something different, that's what you should do. But that has not been what we have found in our work with people. Mm-hmm. And when you research other large groups of people too. And so, yeah, there is no right or wrong way. It is constant. And that's what's so great about us working with people is you get the opportunity then to ask the individual, like, well, what are you feeling? What are you noticing? Mm-hmm. And then we have record of what's coming in. So let's change it to where you do.
Because everybody's different, right?
Everybody's different.
Yep.
Everybody's different. And, you know, like we'll stay on this same conversation of fat is fuel. If you train Like a lot of people, one of the big things right now for zone 2 and building endurance and being a mammoth on the mountain and all of this is you train fasted or you train low carb, and then you go try to introduce carbs when it comes time for the event. But your body can't utilize those as well as if you had trained with them. Mm-hmm. So there's all of these variables that you kind of have to look at if you're truly trying to optimize. And I'd say the biggest point is not that you need to go do the things I'm talking about, is just to remember that there is no one size absolute fits all. And that is all you hear about now. And all you read about on the forums is people going to war over one methodology or another. And no one on there is more right or wrong than the other. Mm-hmm. It's all individual, and you can never argue with someone's subjective experience. If you feel phenomenal doing everything I say don't do, you should keep doing everything I say don't do. I mean, it's very tailored to the person.
Absolutely. And you know, and I've discovered that stuff on the mountain myself.
Yeah.
I've done all of these and tried to successfully do all of these on the mountain. And then I'd overthink myself and say, man, you know, I'm going to do carnivore until dinner. And then I'm going to hit a peak refuel or something like that. And, you know, that particular trip, I did okay. But digestively, after a couple of days, it wasn't good.
Yeah.
But anyway, let's go back. We're going to step back just a little bit, and let's talk about water, the most important nutrient in the body. Okay. What do you recommend? And I know this depends, but what do you recommend on the daily for someone that's training? Let's say they're training for an hour. Okay. They have just a regular 9 to 5er. What do you recommend? What's a good rule of thumb for how much water to consume?
I'm really glad you threw that in there. So there are recommendations that people can follow, but what science fails at is they fail at trying to get that information into something that translates into something meaningful for someone. So, you know, one thing that we say is there is a massive difference between what's optimal and what's practical. Mm-hmm. And I find that the optimal recommendations aren't feasible for your average person. Like, for example, are you going to monitor 8 ounces every 30 minutes for your 8-hour workday? Probably not. You're probably going to get an email. You're going to get a phone call. I mean, that's a lot to manage.
Right.
And so I would veer on two sides of this. Number one, if you're not a good water drinker, and I think everyone's going to have a decent gauge as to what that means, right? I would try to be more intentional. If you are, there's no real reason to believe that more is going to get you better. And a very, very practical, basic litmus test is looking at the color of your pee.
Okay.
How often are you going pee? And what color is it when you go? For the most part, you do not want it to be concentrated dark yellow. Now, there's like 2 schools of thoughts that exist on this. One is you need to be drinking a gallon a day. You don't. Not everyone needs to be guzzling a gallon per day. The other is you need to drink probably more than you are if you feel like you're not already good at this anyway. If you don't feel like you pay any attention to it. And I think simply having like a tiered Nalgene that's clear with measured lines on it, giving yourself goals, right? Drinking half of that between 8 and noon, the other half between noon and 4, and then another full one between 4 and when you go to bed or whatever. Doesn't make you get up a million times at night.
Yeah, as we get older, we got to think about that type of thing.
But I mean, water helps obviously in metabolic processes. It helps you process food, in other words. But this idea that we've all got to be guzzling a gallon is also not true for a variety of reasons, right? If you have a person, especially who's not sweating a lot, because fluid intake and urine output is an equilibrium that you're trying to strive for. So if you don't have someone who's losing through sweat or any other means, just taking more in is just diluting electrolytes. Just, it doesn't necessarily, it's not going to mean any better output or any better outcome for you. So that's why I think, again, when anyone is either listening to a podcast like this or they're reading something online or whatever, you've always got to ask yourself, okay, I'm hearing you, this person, say, here's what's optimal. What's practical? What's maybe better than what I'm doing now, effort wise? But also, like, I'm not going to do that. I'm not, because consistency is king. Consistency is king. I don't care what you do for 3 weeks. If you're not doing that again in 3 months, like, it takes a long time of consistency for progress to show up in any form or fashion, whether it's performance, whether it's building muscle, whether it's losing body fat, it doesn't matter. It takes a long time of consistency to see that. So if you're hearing something you don't feel like you can be consistent at, don't write it off. Ask, what's the middle ground? What can I do based off of what this person's saying, and find that.
Yeah. So simply, if you're at an office and, you have your 4 cups of coffee first thing in the morning, and then all of a sudden you look around and it's 11 o'clock and you haven't drank any water.
Are you at 4 cups of coffee by 11?
No.
I was going to say, that's impressive.
No. I like my coffee.
But back to your question. I'm sorry.
But and let's say, you don't get any water in. If you were to just take, and after you finish your 4 cups of coffee, sometime between that time and noon, if you were to take 1 cup and just commit to drinking that 1 cup, and then you commit to drinking 1 more cup before you leave for the day, that's change. And if you can consistently do that, and it doesn't seem like much, but it's something. And if you can consistently do that, I think that's your point.
That is the point. Yep. And I mean, even talking about this, most people listening to this are going to be interested in losing body fat or putting on muscle. Even as simple, like if you're talking about the losing body fat piece of this, even as simple as just thinking about, what did I used to do, or what have I normally done, and how can I change that? So if that's like, you go to your local steakhouse and you get 1 roll instead of 5 before the meal comes, and you decide to cut your steak down from 16 ounces to 8, and you cut the baked potato in half, but you still get the butter, sour cream, and cheese on it. Is it boiled chicken and broccoli worth, 300 calories? No, but it's different. I mean, you have shaved 600-700 calories off, even though it's not this, lean cuisine looking meal. And the same with building muscle. If you have struggled with consistency in the gym at all, and you just commit, instead of saying, look, I'm going to go 6 days a week for an hour, you're like, I can't do that. I've got 2 kids. I got a full-time job. I'm going to go 3 days a week for 30 minutes and follow a plan. You will, and you do that, I will guarantee you that you will build more muscle doing that than this beautiful 6-week plan that you can never find the time to get in. All right. A phrase we use all the time, you've heard me say it, is, I'd rather be consistently good than occasionally great. Occasionally great does nothing, but consistently good will always produce something. And so I think that's the balance that you're trying to find. And that's so different than what we hear now. I mean, especially in our world, right? Oh man, am I in trouble here? But the 20 to 60 male hunting alpha crowd, right, is hard charging, do it all. I have a job and kids that I want to be present of. I can't, but I can find something more than what I was doing, right? And I think that people will be amazed at what they can do if they can find some consistency. And so whether that's water intake by filling up your coffee mug 2 more times than you usually do, or getting half the steak that you usually get, or, working out 3 days a week instead of the 6 you'd like to, that'll do it. I've seen it time and time again. It will do it.
Yep. So speaking of water, okay, I had something I wanted to run by you. Okay. I did a video. It was a YouTube short, and you guys can go out there and see it. But basically we were hunting, we got down to this creek, and we were going to fill up water and take it back to camp. Okay. So I got on the video as an expert. And I told people, here's what I do. You know, if I'm a little bit behind on my hydration, I'll go down there, and while I'm sitting there at that creek, I'm going to pound this Nalgene size water bottle full of water.
Camel up.
I'm telling you, man, because it's going to take me places. Dude, I got ripped a new one by a couple of folks on YouTube. Like, that's the worst thing you can do and all that. And so then I started researching it. And I think one thing that I was doing with that I failed to say on the video was that I did put electrolytes in there. So that was good. Just turn that thing any way you need to there.
Yeah, I'm good.
Are you a little bit close?
I'm good.
You good?
I'm good. Keep rolling with the story, yeah.
So I did put some electrolytes in there. But yeah, I would have the habit of pounding water right there. So I now know that wasn't good for me. Why?
What did they say? That was my question.
They say that, and there was kind of went back and forth a little bit, but they were saying you can't consume that much water all at one time because it's very dangerous. And
okay, like the reason I ask what did they say is because that is going to be the overarching belief for most people. And I have found one of the most helpful things to do in our work is to clarify truth about a topic versus just give this random explanation, because random explanations don't mean anything to anyone. Solving a problem does, right? And if there's a belief there, then you can sort of think to that. It's not going to be dangerous in the setting that you're describing, because your kidneys and your lungs are largely going to regulate fluid balance. Again, your body only cares about keeping you alive. And, you know, we can say this on this podcast, and I'd probably say it on any podcast, but for us to not think that intelligent design is a thing, go take an A&P class. The margin that you've got to sit in to stay alive on something as simple as fluid intake in your body and the behind the scenes hormones that have to kick in to regulate fluid intake so you don't die is alone a subject and remarkable. And that's taking place in tons of different processes every second of every day to keep you alive. So you're not going to die because of that. The two things I would say is you could potentially dilute some of your electrolytes. The question, though, is like, are you going to dilute them enough to then become symptomatic? In other words, are you going to feel the negative side effects or create a situation where you got to get out of the backcountry? Again, probably not likely.
It depends.
It can depend. It can depend on you, and that is true. But that is also why I say not likely, because those variables would mean you're not eating or replacing any sodium, and you're not eating or drinking any electrolytes in your fluid, and you're continuing to basically consume water while simultaneously sweating. All these variables. You're probably not doing that. I mean, peak alone is going to help you back on the salt level, right? Right. The second thing is that there is like this is big in the marathoning community about what they call hyperhydration, which is in the days leading up to the marathon, you exceed your fluid goals with the idea of, okay, well, now your cells are going to be what they call fully saturated with everything that you need. So you've got some margin there if you start to lose too much. But again, I've not seen anything convincing enough to me to think that we can hyperhydrate. Not to mention, again, going back to point one, your body's going to fight pretty dang hard to keep you at an equilibrium, meaning it's going to cause you to continue to pee until you are back to the equilibrium. Mm-hmm. And so one of the themes that you'll see as we keep talking specifically about backcountry nutrition is totals and timing. You need to be consuming whatever the nutrient, we'll call it nutrient, whatever the nutrient is, carbs, proteins, fats, water, electrolytes, with frequency through the day. It can't be like, oh yeah, I had it in the morning, so I'll just, maybe once we get back to camp, I'll get some more in me. If you want to really excel, there's a difference between like, I survived the day on the mountain, and really excelling. if you want to really excel, you need to be making sure that you're getting enough of said nutrient in with enough frequency through the course of the day to make sure that you're never falling too low. And that's true of all those nutrients.
Yep.
Right. So, I wouldn't have been as quick to chastise you as it sounds like you got.
I got ripped.
It sounds like it.
Yeah. And I'm like, well, the water intake depends. I mean, are you talking about a man? Are you talking about a woman? Are you talking about someone that's 250 pounds? You talking about somebody that's 120?
Yeah.
It depends. But, I that's what I always did though, is when I got to a water source, and especially if we had been a little bit light on water, I would try to hydrate up a little bit, but I always make sure that I include my electrolytes in there, because if you've been without for a while on the mountain, you're sweating, you're losing a lot of those electrolytes along with a lot of fluid. To try to replace some of that is a good thing.
Yep.
For sure. Okay, so we talked about water. Let's talk about protein for just a second. Okay. Now, protein, that is made up of a bunch of amino acids, right? And with protein, there's a rule of thumb out there, and I had always heard 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. Okay. I learned something from you just the other day. And I also learned from a podcast that you did, and it was one of your Q&A podcasts, I believe. But you were talking about protein. You talk about, it's not pound of body weight. It's pound of lean body mass. Is that correct?
Yep.
And then you used a factor of like 75% versus
0.7 grams.
So 0.7 grams per pound of
lean mass.
Yep.
Or you could do target body weight. I mean, there's a lot of, this is where it does depend, and it can be very variable on several different factors that you would, depending on what you would use as the multiplier. Mm-hmm. But the general premise of what you're talking about is that 0.7 grams per pound of lean mass, not always total weight. And I'll give you a couple of examples. But that is, for the most part, the point that we see trips the meter to build muscle. And that's that's what you're trying to get to, right?
Right.
Now, if a person likes a higher protein diet and exceeds that and doesn't have any issues with processing protein to where it would be unwarranted for them to have more, like, you could have more. But again, you're always trying to ask yourself, does doing so get me anything?
Right.
And if the answer to that is no, well, then what are we doing? So the 0.7 grams is based off of if you have an individual, I'll use myself as an example. When I weighed 270, if I had based that off of weight at that time, I would be feeding 140 pounds of fat mass. Well, fat mass is not muscle. You're not trying to feed mass that is not lean tissue. Because again, remember, we said this like in the first 5 minutes of our podcast, was protein's main responsibility is to grow or repair a muscle, or grows hair, heals your cuts, etc. But if that weight that I'm accounting for or using in my calculation is not lean tissue, I'm going to be way overshooting that number, right? And so you don't need to use that target necessarily. Now, even, we have like the one time that it is looked at to go over the 0.7 would be in someone who is training very, very hard in a hypocaloric state. In other words, they are in a really big deficit and they are training quite a bit. You can go over that protein threshold to ensure that you're not losing too much muscle mass. And part of that is you are assuming some of those protein calories are being used as energy. Now, if you have a person who, like, to create a deficit, if you're talking about fat loss, let's say, because a lot of people, if they're not, they soon will be coming into fat loss after Thanksgiving and Christmas before spring ons, right? Right. If you are targeting that, ideally you're only going to create as small of a deficit as possible to get the weight to move, because that's going to ensure good muscle retention in the process. Big deficits equal big muscle loss, right? You do not want to create some massive deficit. It's really appealing because the weight moves really, really fast, but there is a difference between fat loss and weight loss. I do not care about weight loss if it's not fat, because that usually means it's something that I don't want to lose, right? Either nutrients or water or muscle or something along those lines. I'm really only trying to target fat loss, which is a lot more boring because it's not as fast. But the end composition and the end ability that a person is chasing is generally going to be done there. So yes, we typically target, the 0.7 per pound of lean mass or targeted weight. There's a number of different ways you could spin it, kind of based on who you're talking to, but you nailed it.
So for me, you've got me at 120 grams of a goal. Okay.
As your bare minimum. Yep.
Right. And that's the bare minimum, right?
That's the threshold we're trying to hit to.
That's where we need to hit. So if I step on the scale, I'm 170. And so you calculated that off of how much lean body mass?
I'd have to see my calculator, but I would bet it's 170, because your goal was not to lose weight.
That is correct.
And so
that is correct.
Let me get my calculator because now I'm curious.
Okay. Okay, you've got your trusty calculator out.
Trusty calculator, yep. It was based off of so that was your targeted body weight.
Okay.
Now, if you had something like, this is going down another hole, but if you had something like a DEXA scan,
right,
or you had a true, valid, reliable source of getting what your lean mass is, you could use that.
And I will have that information soon. I've paid for it.
Oh, nice.
Online.
You're on it.
I haven't scheduled it. I actually have to make that call this afternoon. But I will have that. And you, this last podcast that you put out, you talked about a DEXA scan, what that is and all that. So if people want to check that out and find out what that is, that's a really cool tool that we could use maybe once a year, something like that.
Yeah.
And kind of see where you're at. And it can tell you all kinds of cool information. So
yeah. So we use targeted body weight because you were already at it, and you go slightly over, which is totally fine because it's not. You are not compromising other nutrients. You need to be over that. You just prefer to eat that way.
Sure.
And there are times where eating above that threshold holds value. And this is me. I eat above my threshold because it takes that for me to feel like I've had anything to eat.
Oh, right. So you feel satiety. Is that the word?
You've nailed it. Yep. So I feel greater satiety with a little more protein. I'm still not going up to, sometimes it's 1 and 2 grams per pound of weight. I'm not going up there. But yes, I feel greater satiety. And I would define that as it fills me up at that meal faster than if I didn't have it. And it also holds me from that meal until the next one longer. So I'm not just sitting there, 2 hours after I finish eating, just looking for something to fill the void, right? It's taking me to the next meal without having to deal with it. So again, don't hear 0.7 and feel like it's bad to go over, or we're simply saying that is what it takes to trip that trigger to be where you need to be. But there are times where going over does hold value. But again, to say everyone needs to be at the 1 gram per pound or 2.2 grams per kilo, not true.
Okay. Well, one thing I've found with how I've got things laid out, you said, okay, if you have to, let's say you have 200 grams of protein that you're going to hit in a day. Maybe I'm getting that confused with another nutrient, but anyway, we divided that up.
Distribution.
It was, I'm sorry, it was 120 is where I need to hit. So 120, we divided that up. So I had 30 grams, basically a target, 30 grams each meal, because I broke it up into 4 sections. Doing that, when I first started, I was really heavy on the protein in the morning. And then I'm trying to catch up on carbs. And then I would get some more protein in that last meal.
Yep.
And so now I've really started paying attention to trying to get as close to that 30 grams each meal.
Yeah. And
I've noticed that I'm not as hungry when that next meal comes. Yep. I think that's what's doing it.
I'm sure it is.
Yeah, that's what's doing it. So that was a discovery that I've made over the past week. So anyway, Kyle, man, thank you so much. What we're going to do, we're going to wrap this up, and we're going to have to do a second episode. Okay. And we're going to really get into the backcountry stuff. We're going to get into some practical, I'm going to talk to you about, what does your backcountry diet look like? And I'll tell you kind of what I'm doing, what I've done, and we'll kind of get into the weeds on that a little bit. We'll talk specifically about backcountry nutrition and some ways to do that. So thank you for coming on. Now, where can people find you?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Everything is under Valley to Peak Nutrition. So, we've got a website, but it's all V2P Nutrition. So the podcast is Valley to Peak Nutrition, which is on Spotify and Apple and all the major podcast places. And then our website has tons of resources and courses that you can check out. And then all the social media channels too.
Awesome. Well, you guys go check it out. Thank you for joining the Mountain Dude podcast, and we'll catch you next time. Until next time, keep your eyes on the summit. This is the Mountain Dude podcast, signing off.